Welcome to my Best of 2024 video. Today we're going over the top 20 Mandela effects that I've covered this year, as well as a brand new Mandela effect I've never covered before at the end of this video. Please enjoy. I have a question for you. Which of these logos is the official Starbucks logo? Is it the one on the left with a full crown, or is it the one on the right with a star on its crown? I'm sure most of you have seen this logo 1,000 times. This should be incredibly easy to pick from, right? This Mandela effect has been troubling a lot of people recently, so let's figure it out once and for all. This is the correct Starbucks logo. I gotta be honest with you, this one got me. The star on top looks so weird and so out of place. And looking at the history of the Starbucks logo doesn't ease my mind either. Since 1987, the mermaid on the Starbucks logo has had that star on her crown. It has never been removed or altered. This one really got me. What about you? Guess what? We have another missing emoji. One that a ton of people remember existing that now, apparently, has never existed before. Let's talk about it. I've covered missing emoji Mandela effects twice before, and here we are again. We've lost the robber, we've lost the hiker, we've lost the swordfish, among others, and now it's happened again. This time, it's the Seahorse emoji. Do you remember there being a Seahorse emoji? As it is now, there is no Seahorse emoji, and there has evidently never been one. Recently, this has been blowing up online as everyone has been struggling to find evidence that it did indeed exist, but nothing has surfaced. Everyone seems to remember it facing the left side, and that's about it. There seems to be differing opinions on what the color was. Some say it was blue, some say it was yellow, some say it was orange, I'm not really sure. But it's near unanimous that there was a Seahorse emoji at some point. There's just no proof, as of right now. Let's talk about the Nintendo Wii and its launch title Wii Sports. This simple packing game made a big splash back in 2006. It contained tennis, baseball, bowling, golf, and boxing. It was extremely easy to pick up and play, which made it popular with most demographics. There wasn't a lot of depth to these games, but it was great for parties and families to have a good laugh. By the end of the Wii's life cycle, it sold over 101 million units, meaning a ton of people on this earth have played Wii Sports. Now that you're up to date with Wii Sports, let's talk about its Mandela effect. When you would win one of these games, a quick replay of what happened would play, and then a pop-up would appear saying and showing the words, "You win." Does that sound familiar to you? Because if it does, then you have been affected by the Mandela effect. It apparently never actually says, "You win." It shows the text on screen, but no voice appears. Nintendo has always taken a very minimal approach to voice acting in their games. While the Xbox and PlayStation consoles had fully voice-acted adventures, Nintendo typically cut costs by not including voice actors of any kind, or as minimal as possible in their titles. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, you didn't get full voice lines, especially during the Wii console generation. But in Wii Sports, a male voice actor does say lines during matches. In fact, you can watch 5.5-minute compilations of all the random lines and words that he says. But he never once says, "You win." It just doesn't exist. It apparently never existed, and yet so many people remember this line. I even checked out the sequels to Wii Sports, both Wii Sports Resort and Wii Sports Club, and guess what? It's in neither of them as well. So where did this line come from, and why do so many people associate it with Wii Sports? To kick this video off, let's talk about the classic painting, American Gothic, by Grant Wood. This was created in 1930 and has been replicated, recreated, and emulated in other forms of art numerous times because it's such an iconic piece. It's an older couple, a farmer and wife, standing in front of their farmhouse. The man is holding a pitchfork, and both of them look very weary and tired. Many say that this painting really captured this moment in time in Iowa. So what's the Mandela effect? Well, that couple in the painting, it isn't a husband and wife. It's actually a farmer and his blonde-haired daughter. That's right, not husband and wife. It's actually a farmer and his blonde-haired daughter. But a ton of people online are really confused about this because they believe it was an older couple. When this painting was created, Grant Wood actually used his sister as a model for the daughter in the painting. So this being the farmer's blonde-haired daughter has seemingly always been the case. But then why do so many people remember an older woman? Some online have speculated that the painting must have been changed or altered, but there is currently no evidence that any change has ever been made to this. When it first appeared in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, a local newspaper, real Iowa farmers and wives were mad. They believed it to be a nasty caricature of Midwestern farmers. Believing American Gothic made these farmers out to be pinched, grim-faced, puritanical Bible thumpers. That's not all. In fact, one wife of an Iowan farmer told Grant Wood that he should have his head bashed in for the piece. Apparently the farmers and their wives were not a fan of this piece. which is hilarious because nowadays it's revered as this beautiful piece of this time and place. But actually, the people that lived in that time and place thought it was pretty awful. In fact, Grant tried to defend himself as a loyal Iowan by insisting that the people in American Gothic aren't intended to be farmers, but rather small town folk. Not Iowans, but generic Americans. Absolutely hilarious. Here is a series of classic Mandela effects I've never talked about before, but recently I've been asked to look into it, so here we go. Let's talk about the A-Team. The A-Team was a popular TV show that ran from 1983 to 1987. This TV series is no stranger to the Mandela Effect. Having not only multiple effects of its own, it's also been referenced in other unrelated Mandela effects in recent media, such as the Skechers commercial starring Mr. T talking about how Skechers doesn't have a T in its name. The first A-Team Mandela Effect is in regards to one of the four main characters. Many people remember this character as Mad Dog Murdoch, but in actuality, it's Howling Mad Murdoch, and apparently, it always has been. Does that sound right to you? Both of those names have the word mad in them, but Howling and Dog, they're pretty different. Next up is the color of the 1983 GMC Vandura van the A-Team drove. If you know the show, you can probably visualize the colors in your mind. Many people remember it as an all-black van with a red line going across it. Does that sound about right to you? Well, it shouldn't. As of now, the bottom part is black, the red line is still there, but the top part of the van is gray. This Mandela Effect has troubled so many. Next up is the famous line from Mr. T, "I pity the fool." A lot of people seem to remember BA saying this line in the A-Team, but that is actually not the case. Out of the 98 episodes of the A-Team, Mr. T never actually said that phrase. It was said in a lot of other things, such as interviews and in commercials, but it was never said in the A-Team. I don't know if that's memories getting crossed here and there, or if that's an actual legitimate Mandela Effect, but as always, I throw these out there so that you can decide. Regardless, it's interesting to say the least. Let's talk about a classic cartoon pair from the 90s, Pinky and the Brain. One mouse being highly intelligent with plans for world domination, and the other one being not so much. This back and forth dynamic is what made these characters so fun. These two characters were first introduced in the cartoon show Animaniacs, then getting their own show called Pinky and the Brain, and ending their 90s run with a series called Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain. These characters were around for a long time and a lot of episodes, so this quote should be really simple to finish for anyone that watched them over the years. In each episode, Brain says, "Pinky, are you blanking what I'm blanking?" What goes in the blank? Thinking or pondering? Pinky, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Or is it, Pinky, are you pondering what I'm pondering? Turns out the answer is pondering. Pinky, are you pondering what I'm pondering?
Are you pondering what I'm pondering, Pinky?
Thinking has apparently never been said in any of the well over 100 episodes. Of course, if you look for the now incorrect version of this quote, which was apparently never said, you'll find example after example of people reciting it incorrectly. Which one do you remember? Let's start off this massive video talking about Romeo and Juliet. Specifically that famous balcony scene in Act 2, Scene 2, where Romeo speaks up to Juliet saying, "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun." Well, what if I told you there was no balcony in the famous balcony scene? It doesn't exist and apparently never has. Many people recall the balcony scene when asked about the play, but the reason why is a real mystery. In the play, it is mentioned that Juliet appears at a window, not a balcony. But in nearly all forms of popular modern media for this play, she is shown on a balcony, not in a window. The scene itself is even commonly referred to as the balcony scene. So tell me, do you remember the balcony? Perhaps it was a creative choice made at some point in the production of a play or movie, and ever since then, that choice influenced nearly all media? Or maybe something changed. The Birds is a 1963 movie by Alfred Hitchcock. It was a horror mystery that focused on the absurd and scary concept of unexplained violent bird attacks on people. If you watch the movie today, it's pretty funny, but back in 1963, this terrorized people. It made people legitimately nervous around birds. So why do I bring this up? There seems to be a large group of people that remember The Birds being a black and white movie, but it turns out that The Birds was always a color movie. In fact, many people seem to believe that this movie was originally black and white and was later colorized. What's interesting is that this belief even existed back then. In fact, the lead actress of The Birds, Tippi Hedren, claimed in interviews that so many people would tell her how happy they were that they finally colorized the movie, and she'd always have to break the news to them saying, "It's always been in color." Some people have speculated this weird belief came from the fact that so many people had black and white TVs at the time. But that doesn't explain why people that saw it in movie theaters would remember it being in black and white when it was shown in color. It's another weird example of the Mandela Effect, and it goes to show that the effect has been around a lot longer than people realize. I wonder how far back it actually goes. Let's check out a new spelling Mandela Effect, this time from the UK. What is the name of this candy? Is it Dib Dab? Or is it Dip Dab? I'm not from the UK, but I've heard about this enough times that I figured it's time to ask. This sherbet dip with a strawberry flavored lolly is actually called Dip Dab. Did you get that right? When I was doing research for this one, I actually found a pretty interesting tweet to back up this Mandela Effect from 2017. Jacksepticeye, a pretty famous YouTuber, tweeted out, "You ever go to the shop and think, yeah, I'm gonna kill myself with sugar today?" This was followed up with a picture of him dabbing while holding a dip dab. Now, this isn't the crazy part. What's crazy is that another big YouTuber named Amazing Phil jumped in and said, "What? I swear it was called Dib Dab. Mandela Effect?" That tweet alone has 13,000 likes. 13,000 people saying, "Huh? Dip Dab? I thought it was Dib Dab." I found that to be pretty amazing. What do you think? Here's a quick Mandela Effect for you. Let's talk about the painting Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. This famous painting, as many people recall, was of a man standing on a massive rock looking out into the ocean. It turns out that this painting is not a man looking out into the sea, but actually a fog-covered forest. Take a look for yourself. Now, why so many people believe the man in this painting is looking out at an ocean is anyone's guess. Perhaps it's the fog in the painting, or the word sea used in its title. But this painting is actually looking out into dense fog-covered forests. There are trees, cliffs, valleys, mountains, and peaks. The painting that so many people seem to remember of a man looking out towards the sea, it simply doesn't exist. So here's where things get weird. This painting has been recreated many times in photographs, and for some reason, so many of them are recreated by looking out into the sea. Did something change at some point? Or has everyone simply been misremembering this world-famous painting? I'll let you decide. Oh, and fun fact, this painting might look familiar to Legend of Zelda fans, because it's obviously a direct inspiration for the cover art of Breath of the Wild, which released in 2017. Not only that, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, released in 1988, used this painting as an inspiration as well. Let's talk about music videos. I'm sure if you're old enough, you'll remember when music videos came around, or at least blew up into the mainstream. Maybe your mind went to MTV when it launched as a music video channel in 1981 with its airing of Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. So many online have been discussing a historical change that has people really scratching their heads. What if I told you that music videos didn't come into existence in the 1980s? What if I told you they didn't come into existence in the 1970s? Well, what about the 1960s? Nope. It was actually in the 1950s that music videos got their start. And I don't just mean one or two outliers. This was an entire industry with hundreds of these made. Now, before I get comments saying, how is this a Mandela effect? You have to remember that historical Mandela effects are especially unique, in that we might actually remember history being one way, or playing out in a specific way, only for it to seemingly change. That is how it's a Mandela effect. Many people remember music videos starting to come out in the late 1970s, or the early 1980s. This is now incorrect, and has apparently always been incorrect. And I'm not talking about promotional music video clips for songs. Those have always existed. I'm talking full-on music videos. Here's the entire song with a video of the artists and musicians playing it and doing what they do. In the 1950s, there was a device that played music videos called the Scopitone. These used 16mm film and were placed in popular locations like restaurants, bars, and lounges. Imagine a jukebox, but with a screen. This spread from France to Italy to the UK to the United States and beyond. And the Scopitone wasn't the only one. There were actually rival competitor devices. One such example is the Cinebox, which also came out in the 1950s. And later on, there was the Color Sonic, which used 35mm film. Over the decades that these devices were in service, there were hundreds of music videos that you could play. So tell me, if you were alive back then and you're watching this today, does any of this sound familiar? As it usually goes with these historical Mandela effects, these things that come up often sound fantastical, like an alternate reality. But perhaps we all just forgot. I honestly don't know. I'll let you decide. Let's talk about a new Pokemon Mandela effect. In Gen 3 there was a Pokemon introduced called Lotad. This strange frog-looking water and grass type Pokemon has 2 evolutions and has appeared in many Pokemon games. Its number is 270 out of over 1,000 Pokemon in total. So what is the Mandela Effect regarding Lotad? How many legs does it have? 4 legs? Or 6 legs? If you're like so many others online, you more than likely believe Lotad has 4 legs. It starts with 4 legs, evolves to stand up on 2 legs, and then evolves again to continue standing up on 2 legs, but this time with a sombrero, for some reason. This is now incorrect, and apparently has always been incorrect. Lotad has 6 legs, and then evolves to have 2. When I first heard of this, I thought, no way. So I jumped on Pokemon Go and spun its little character model around, and sure enough, 6 legs. How have I never noticed this before? How weird is this? What I don't understand is, why does it have 6 legs? It's so random. Next I went online to see what others thought, and sure enough, hundreds and hundreds of comments of people being completely shocked Lotad has 6 legs. Get this, I even found a Pokemon fanfiction story on some random website from years ago that happened to mention Lotad in its story and how it had 6 legs. It had a single comment underneath it from 5 years ago saying, Lotad only has 4 legs. Absolutely amazing. What do you remember? Continuing with our unintentional recent tradition of pointing out Mandela effects from the UK, today we're looking at the Blue Riband candy bar, or at least that's what so many people seem to believe it's called. This brand started back in 1936 and was acquired by Nestle in 1988. Recently though, after 80 years of it being on store shelves, only now have some people started to realize it wasn't actually called Blue Ribbon, it's actually called Blue Riband. R-I-B-A-N-D. Looking deeper into this Mandela effect, I found countless others online who remember this brand being Ribbon instead of Riband. Not only that, I found multiple articles talking about this supposed change. Going back further, I even found a TV show talking about reactions to Blue Ribbon actually being called Blue Riband. Check this out.
Social media was set alight by people baffled and upset that a biscuit they'd always thought was called Blue Ribbon.
Yeah. Is it und, isn't it? It's the d on the end, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called Blue Riband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did people think it was called Blue Ribbon?
I have no idea, because it's been called that since 1936. Consumers were so deeply traumatized.
You saw people crying in the streets.
Yeah. They went online to vent their horror. Yeah, of course they did. Becca wrote, "I've been lied to all my life." And Terry agreed with Riband. That'll take some explaining. Okay, I'm going to do a little experiment with you now, which I know you'll love. So what I'd like you to do in this little experiment is write down the name as it appears on the label of a Kit Kat.
Okay, but I've written Kit Kat because I'm assuming that's how it's written on the label.
Right, Robert, let's see yours.
Just says Kit Kat, really? I mean,
it's a circle with Kit Kat on it.
Yeah.
Right.
I put a hyphen in it.
Right,
Oh, it could be a hyphen, yeah, it could be.
It hasn't got a hyphen. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
No hyphens over here.
Amazing.
Perhaps all this confusion is because of how it's been pronounced or mispronounced over the years. Or possibly all of these people simply weren't paying attention to the name of the bar. That, or it's a Mandela effect. Let me know. Let's take a look at the Vitruvian Man, a drawing of a man facing towards you with arms and legs in different positions. Here's my question for you. In this detailed anatomical drawing, how many arms are shown? Many people remember 3 sets of symmetrical arms, but this drawing in fact only has 2 sets of arms. Some believe the empty space on the left and right between the arms and legs was supposedly where that extra set of arms were, but as of now, they've never existed. Others believe that the 3rd set of arms were sticking straight up in the air. There are a few different variations of this supposed memory, but in all cases, there were 3 sets of arms, not 2. Do you remember there being more than this, or is this exactly what you remember? I want you to all think about the first navigational device made for traveling in cars. I know that was a very loaded statement, but follow me here. I don't mean opening a big physical map. I mean the first human-made technology of the modern era that we use to get around with in cars. Everyone knows what GPS is, right? Global Positioning System. It's a navigational system developed by the US Department of Defense in the 1970s. It calculates your exact location on Earth and helps you navigate around accurately. This technology became available for all citizens in 1995, and in 2000 it was no longer intentionally downgraded to the public. So everyone had access to the full version. That is, as far as we know, the truth, and that's the way the story has always gone. But now is where the Mandela Effect comes in. Apparently the first GPS device was created in 1932. That's right, 1932. There was a device called the Inter-Auto, which is now the world's first personal navigation system for an automobile. This device had a scrolling map, and connected to the car's speedometer to remain accurate. In fact, it's been compared to a modern-day Garmin or TomTom navigation device. It tracked your location in real time at an accurate speed as you drove along the road. Am I alone in thinking this is just unbelievable? It feels like an AI-created artificial history that's just too bizarre to believe. And yet apparently it's real, and it has always been real. Is this what you remember learning about? Has anyone ever heard of this before? And not only that, it gets weirder somehow. Doing the research for this, I found out that there was a wristwatch version that you could wear while driving that did about the same thing. This thing was called the Plus 4 Wristlet Route Finder. Wow, that's a mouthful. And it came out in 1927. 1927, before the Great Depression. This wrist navigational device used tiny little scrolls that can be switched in and out depending on what route was taken. I've joked about it many times over the course of this series, but I cannot wait to see what random thing gets retroactively invented next. I don't know, TV in the 1800s? Sure, why not? Let's talk about something fun related to an older Mandela effect. Remember the Skechers Mandela Effect? Where people remember Skechers being spelled with a T, but apparently it never had a T in it, so it's Skechers or Skechers? I don't know, it's a weird one. This Mandela Effect has been around forever, but apparently Skechers finally caught on to this obvious and easy target, and made an ad out of it. Turns out that this isn't the first time this has happened. In my video Brand New Mandela Effects Part 24, I talked about how the Fruit of the Loom tapped into the Mandela Effect popularity for an April Fool's prank back in 2022. What they did was they added the missing cornucopia back to its logo. Some found it to be funny, others thought it was gaslighting. Go check out that video for more details on that. All this to say, Skechers made a Mandela Effect ad relating to their brand, and like last time, you either find it funny or you think it's gaslighting. I'll let you decide. Here's the ad.
Did you know there's no T in Skechers? Never has been, never will be.
What you talking about, fool? Mr. T's always in Skechers. T and D's Skechers. T and D's Skechers. Ah! T and D's Skechers. T and this pair of Skechers. There's even a T and D's Skechers. Skechers, Mr. T, Skechers.
I'm just saying people often misspell Skechers and put a T in it.
Maybe they should think about changing it then.
Skechers, no T, just comfort.
Do you remember the T? Let's talk about Michelangelo's David. This statue is a Renaissance masterpiece which depicts the biblical hero, David. The Mandela effect regarding the David statue is a detail that many online claim has changed. It's specifically in regards to his eyes. What people seem to remember is that David had normal-shaped pupils, but as of now, that isn't the case. As of right now, David actually has heart-shaped pupils. Does this look right to you? Some have claimed it's a representation of specular highlights in his eyes. Others have claimed it's a heart to represent love, but honestly no one knows. What makes this so fascinating is that this famous statue has been studied for over 500 years. Amazingly enough, this detail has seemingly never been noticed before. What's fascinating is that the Mandela effect changes to famous statues isn't a new phenomena. Just like the thinker, David has seemingly shifted over time. Or at least that's how many people remember it. As of now, there is no explanation regarding the reason the pupils are heart-shaped. It's not even a common trend seen in other statues, let alone other works of Michelangelo. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. When you think of the American Wild West, what do you see? Cowboys, shootouts, horses, maybe some cacti, maybe a few saloons. I'm sure you can name plenty more, but what about camels? Do you think of camels when you think of the American Wild West? You know how much I love to talk about history seemingly changing on this channel, and today is no different. Did you know we had camels roaming the Wild West in America across the states of Texas, Arizona, California, as well as some in Alabama and Mississippi? Sure, why not? These camels were initially introduced into the American Southwest in 1865, when the US Army decided that camels would fare better than horses in desert-like conditions. It would take 5 days to do a loaded trip with a mule, but only 2 days with a camel. Also, 6 camels could do the work of 12 horses in 42 hours less time. There's also the fact that camels could travel carrying heavy loads in terrain that was too tough for wagons to get through. There were even multiple times that the camels found water when everyone else was dying of dehydration. They simply knew where to look. All this made it seem like a pretty great idea, and camels were imported multiple times over the years into the United States. But there were problems. First of all, they had a horrible body odor. It was written to be incredibly offensive to the nose and even scared away horses. meaning they couldn't keep the camels in the same stable as horses, they required their own. The odor was so bad that on some Nevada routes they were even banned from traveling. Secondly, the camels had a nasty disposition and would spit cud when upset. Yet despite all of this, they mostly worked out. So the years passed, the railroads were built, and the camels kept changing hands. The mission they were needed for finished, and it was time to move on. Some escaped, some were freed, some went to California, some went to Mexico, and some somehow ended up in Canada. No, I'm not joking, look. And most bizarrely, in the hands of Confederate troops during the Civil War. Sure, why not? Take a look at this picture. Tell me that this was a real thing that actually happened. I swear our timeline keeps getting weirder and weirder. There was even a gravestone for one beloved Confederate camel. The most horrifying detail about these camels were the feral ones that escaped and terrorized random ranches in towns in the American Southwest. One coming to be known as the Legend of the Red Ghost, a terrifying monster that attacked and trampled humans, ate children, and stalked small towns. Who knows if any of that was true, but imagine someone who had never heard of or seen a camel before, and then a camel walks up. Think of the legends this would have created. Maybe this was always true, and the vast majority of us simply never learned about it. So my question to you, did we actually have camels in the Wild West and during the Civil War in America? It's more likely just some bizarre and mostly unknown history, but these days, I don't know what to believe anymore. What's real? What's fake? What's fact? What's fiction? Everything seems to be blurred today. There's realities and alternative realities. It's seemingly getting harder to pin things down. Sometimes it feels like the past is being retconned with these strange updates, but maybe life has always been weirder than we could imagine. Have you ever heard of cow tipping before? Essentially, it's the juvenile and mean concept of sneaking up on an unsuspecting or sleeping upright cow and pushing it over for entertainment. You don't really hear a lot about cow tipping these days, now that there's so much entertainment at our fingertips. But back in the day, everyone knew someone who knew someone that went cow tipping. I grew up with my grandparents, and even I heard stories of my mom as a teenager sneaking off with a group of friends and going cow tipping. This act has been shown in all forms of media, from TV shows to movies to books. It's just this weird thing that's always existed. But what if I told you that cow tipping, 1, doesn't actually happen, and 2, is physically impossible? As it goes now, cow tipping isn't a real thing, and it has never been a real thing. First of all, cows are massive. It's been determined that you'd need 670 to 900 pounds of force to even attempt to push one over. Secondly, cows only sleep lightly when upright, and easily wake up. They only go to deep sleep when they're lying down. Lastly, and most shockingly, there has never been a recorded case of anyone ever cow tipping. No videos, no evidence, just old stories people used to tell. The concept of cow tipping and the fact that it's never actually existed has been blowing up online lately, so tell me, is this what you remember? Was cow tipping just an urban legend or a myth perpetrated in movies like Heathers, Tommy Boy, Barnyard, and I Love You, Beth Cooper? Or was this actually a thing at some point, and now it's not? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. When I ask you about skyscrapers, as in massive towers that seemingly touch the clouds, what time period do you think of? You're probably thinking modern times, maybe the last 100 years or so. I'm pretty sure you aren't thinking of the Middle Ages. Take a look at this drawing. This is a rendition of the town of Bologna, Italy, during the Middle Ages, and look at how it's filled with skyscrapers. Just look at all those details. While these massive towers don't compare to today's insane engineering feats, it's still absurdly impressive that something like this actually existed over 800 years ago. Between the 12th and 13th century, at least 3 Italian cities were dominated by these massive stone towers, some even reaching 97 meters, or 318 feet. The cities were Florence, Bologna, and San Gimignano. As the story goes now, these towers were built by rich merchants who wanted to display their wealth and power within these cities. But the actual reason has been lost to time. Some say they were defensive structures, others claim that they were hideouts during times of conflict. We really don't know. The construction of these massive skyscrapers took between 3 and 10 years to complete, and the total number of towers that existed back then has been debated for years. We have one historian estimating that there were over 180 towers based on real estate records, but the common number that is thrown around is between 80 and 100 towers. By the 13th century, most of these towers were destroyed or collapsed, although there are still many that still stand to this day, and plenty of pictures of them. They're pretty amazing. The remaining towers became repurposed as prisons, residential buildings, or shops. Today, fewer than 20 of these towers still remain, at least in Bologna, Italy. But here's the weird thing. This isn't the first time that Bologna, Italy has had a Mandela effect. In fact, this is the second major one to come from that town. Pretty interesting, right? Here's that effect. The date is August 2nd, 1980. Today is the date of the Bologna massacre. On this dreadful morning, a time bomb placed inside of an unattended suitcase was left in the waiting room at the Bologna Centrale railway station. When it went off, over 200 people were injured and over 85 people died. The blast collapsed the roof of the waiting room, destroyed most of the main buildings, and even hit a train waiting nearby for boarding. This attack is known as the worst atrocity in Italy since World War II. Now, I bring up this awful tragedy because there is a fascinating Mandela effect attached to it. There is a giant clock on the wall of the Bologna station that stopped working at the exact moment of the attack. On the clock, it reads 10:25 a.m. Now here is where things get weird. Was the clock left at 10:25 a.m. in remembrance of this tragedy, or was it repaired right away? Thousands of people have gone on record as remembering the clock being left at 10:25 a.m. permanently. Newspapers talked about this and even photographs were taken. But now it turns out that it was repaired right away. And for 15 years the clock worked perfectly. In 1995, when it finally broke again, the clock was permanently set to 10:25 a.m. in remembrance of what had happened prior. So here's where things get weirder. An unbelievable number of people remember this clock being stopped all of those 15 years. So many, in fact, that scientific investigations were done to get to the bottom of this massive case of misremembering. This is one of the earliest modern examples of the Mandela effect. So early, in fact, that the term Mandela effect had not yet even been coined. The study showed that 92% of participants believed the clock had been broken the whole time. Not as in fixed right away, left on for 15 years, then stopped, but actually broken since 1980. 92%. Now, another 79% of participants claim to have personally seen the clock set to 10:25 a.m. And get this, that's 79%? That includes all 21 railway employees. An utterly staggering statistic. Now you're up to date on Bologna's two big Mandela effects. Oftentimes, where there's one Mandela effect about a certain place or topic, more are likely to follow. So going forward, keep your eyes on Bologna, Italy. I'm sure something else is going to pop up, and it usually doesn't take that long. Let's end this compilation with a brand new Mandela effect, one I've never talked about before. Let's talk about the 1989 movie Field of Dreams, and its famous quote, "If you build it, they will come." Well, what if I told you one of the most famous lines in movie history isn't actually correct? It turns out so many of us have been saying it wrong, and apparently it's always been different. Most people seem to remember Kevin Costner's character Ray looking out over the empty cornfield and saying, "If you build it, they will come." But the line is actually, "If you build it, he will come." The line is apparently referring to Ray's father, not the crowds or the players. It's about a deeply personal journey of reconciliation, and not the broader idea we attach to this moment. I looked into everything: the script, subtitles, physical copies of the movie, and even the original 1982 novel it's based on. And the line in all of them is, "If you build it, he will come." So where did this incorrect version come from? And why do so many of us remember it wrong? Well, that's the mysterious part of the Mandela effect. We don't know. Maybe they just rolls off the tongue better than he?
How am I going to get the bands to come? If you book them, they will come.
Maybe it was quoted incorrectly on some popular at the time TV show or sketch comedy show. Or maybe it's yet another example of the Mandela effect. Until next time, never stop searching.